Hello YouTube, this is Mike. So today I am checking in with you. I know it's the middle of the night everywhere, so I'll understand if nobody shows up for the live chat. But I just finished watching an interesting video on YouTube and I thought I would share it with you. So I have said in the past, in probably a few different videos, that in my experience, lots of times mental health professionals who themselves have not been in a romantic relationship with somebody who has a cluster B personality disorder, they really don't have any internal experience of what it's like. My experience of when I watch videos from psychologists who are talking about BPD and relationships with BPD, they will talk at it as though they're looking at it under a microscope, which makes perfect sense because that's what they're doing. I mean, there's no reason that they need to go out and get in a relationship with a borderline to be able to, be a professional in that arena. And there's been a couple of videos that I watched where, in one case, there was a video with two mental health professionals, one of which was a very popular YouTube channel, woman psychologist who speaks about it a lot. And they were talking about the stigma against borderlines. And specifically, the two of them were sitting there talking about how, people stigmatize the borderlines, and then they started to make the example of, you wouldn't be mad at your grandmother who was senile, something like that. It was something like that, because they got upset or they got cranky. You would say, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and you wouldn't hold that against them. So why would you do that to somebody who has borderline personality disorder? And then the other person started to say, "Yeah," and then hypothetically started imagining what it would be like for them and what they would do. And the person said, "I like to believe that if I was in a relationship with somebody with BPD and they were starting to split, that I would know that it's not about me and it's their thing, and then I would be there for them." And the assumption was because they were understanding and knew ahead of time what was going on, that somehow that would alleviate the problem and it would go away because of their lack of judgment, their lack of stigmatizing the borderline. And I remember thinking, these people have no clue. They have zero idea what it's like. Maybe they've had borderlines in their office in a clinical setting, but they have no idea what it's like to be split on. It's just so clear. So, as you know, I am somebody who has been in a relationship with a borderline, so I do have personal experience. Before I go any further, this channel is devoted to people who do not suffer from any kind of personality disorder, but have been in a romantic relationship with a borderline, or are currently in a romantic relationship with a borderline, and you are suffering really toxic experiences from it. Borderline personality disorder is a very serious mental illness, and there is no cure for it, but there is treatment for it. And as I understand it, borderlines can be in a state of recovery if they, number one, are completely willing to do the work and they want to heal for their own sake, and if they spend years doing the work. I've heard, and I believe it to be true, I'm sure that there are others, because again, I'm not an expert, but DBT therapy, group therapy, and doing the DBT exercises can be very helpful. So I personally haven't experienced it, but my understanding is that it is possible for somebody with BPD, if they've spent years in therapy, to heal enough to perhaps manage their symptoms enough to be in a relationship. But I think it's extremely important to understand that although it's possible, I think it's rare. and maybe that will change as time goes on and people become more aware of it. But in my experience, it's also rare because many borderlines don't really own up to their side of it and want to get help, just like a lot of other people with a lot of other issues. So it's not on them. It's not an attack on them. All right, so the 10 things. This is coming from a video that I watched from a mental health professional, and it's not my intent to analyze that person or criticize that person, so I won't mention the person's name. I'm just going to read what this person said. Now, as I was listening to these 10 signs that you've been in a relationship with a borderline, as I'm listening to these 10 signs, he didn't say whether or not he had got this information from clinical data or something like that. Didn't say if it was just him making up 10 signs in his experience. Just didn't say. He just said these are 10 signs. And then I saw, as I looked in the notes, that there was extensive notation from different sources. So I'm assuming he got this from sources. But as I go through them with you, I'm going to give you my take on it. Of course, I'm going to tell you whether I agree or disagree. And again, that's just my opinion. I'm not coming from any expertise. I'm just coming from my experience. And bear in mind, again, I don't know everything there is to know about every single type of borderline. I don't. I mean, I dated one, and she had, what people would call quiet borderline personality disorder. So I don't know what it's like to date one that throws knives at you or, calls the cops on you or tries to beat you up or anything like that. And the reason I say that is because it comes up in this. I'll have some comments about it as we go through it. So you can go ahead and compare your experience with this. And I think you may have the same experience as I do, that this is really coming from a mental health professional who's looking at it from the outside, and they're trying to understand as best they can. So they're coming to some superficial conclusions from observations, but they're really missing a lot. And he even says throughout, he says, and I think the reason for that is, and as he talks about what he thinks is going on, I'm shaking my head going, nope, that's not it. I can understand why you'd see it that way, but having been there, that's not what was going on at all. All right, so let's get to them because some of them are very interesting, some of them are very accurate. And let's keep going. So, first sign that you have been exposed in a romantic relationship to somebody with personality disorder. First sign is that you are unsure how you fit in with your partner's behavior. It's not clear to you how you, this is my term here, deserve the treatment that you're getting, both positive and negative. And the way that I've described that is that from the very beginning of the relationship, I can remember for me, from the very beginning, during the love bombing, because this is what starts a relationship with a borderline. It doesn't start slowly. You guys are sort of friends, and you slowly work up towards nothing like that at all. It's they find you, and they do. They find you with their radar, and they decide you're the one. Before you even know they exist sometimes, they've already decided. They come to you, and in whatever way that they do, and they might even directly, consciously say, I've chosen you. You're the one for me. We're meant to be together. And then they proceed to love bomb you, which then, of course, you respond to very positively. And that, in my experience, is because they have a radar, just like you do, and they can tell when somebody, even though they may not consciously use the term codependent, they can tell when somebody is incredibly needy, that has that hole inside of them, deeply needing love and affection, validation, wanting to be seen and loved on the deepest level that you never got, you've been carrying it around with you your whole life, and they can smell that. And of course, they relate to that because they want that same thing. And So they love bomb you. You think it's the best thing that's ever happened to you. And while you are being seduced by all the love bombing, at the same time, if you're honest with yourself and you go back and relive it, you will realize that you also felt extremely insecure. And you felt like you were walking on eggshells. And it was a very exciting experience. And of course, it rekindled your experience as a child with your parents. When things were good and mommy was being good to you and giving you attention, it was amazing. But at the same time, you were wondering, when is the rug going to get pulled out from underneath you? So the way he describes that is that the partner is unsure how he deserves the treatment, both positive and negative. Obviously, the positive one is not as easy to identify, but the negative one, I'm sure you've experienced. When you've been attacked, devalued, demeaned, you ask yourself, what the hell did I do? How could I possibly have accomplished that? So let me just stop again. I wanted to say this earlier, but anybody watching this who does have borderline personality disorder, bear in mind that the best way to make use of my channel, because I'm not here to address borderlines, because I don't have BPD, I don't know what you need to do to recover. The best way to make use of this channel is not to see if I'm being accurate and if that's right about you, and to defend yourself and why you need to defend all borderlines and tell me why I'm so horrible because I'm stigmatizing you. The best way to make use of this channel is to actually try and understand why people who've been in relationships with borderlines, what we experience and why we think the way that we do, even if we are mistaken about you. Even if we truly are unfairly stigmatizing you, nothing happens in a vacuum. So it's, at the very least, you can gain some knowledge of, well, now I at least understand why people respond the way they do based on my behavior. All right. So that's number one, is that the partner is unsure about how they deserve the treatment that they're getting, both positive and negative. It creates anxiety. Number two, feelings of shame and guilt. This obviously is right on the heels of that, because while we tend not to feel guilty about the love bombing, and this is an interesting thing, we definitely will feel shame and guilt for any negative behavior that we get. If they get mad at us, if they split on us, if they attack us, demean us, harm us, betray us in some way, especially, it's especially strange if they've done something like cheat on you. And what will be strange is that you'll feel guilty, even though they betrayed you. And I can remember the first couple of times that I got split on, and she disappeared and blamed it on me and said she couldn't have anything to do with me, and said, of course, accused me of something I didn't do, or said something completely, totally unrelated, although being honest, which, after having the best love-making and conversation and, talk on the phone and I love you and blah, blah, blah. The next day I get the phone call or the text or the email that says, I had a bad dream. I don't feel safe with you. We have to break up. And my first response was, again, not knowing what I was dealing with, my first response was, all right, well, if you change your mind, you know where I am. Of course, looking back on it, I wouldn't have responded that way at all. I would have said, you're right. We should never talk to each other again. Please break off all contact with me. But because I didn't know what I was dealing with, I thought I was being patient and rational and loving, and this is how I would want to be treated in that same scenario. But then a couple of weeks went by, and right around that, I remember probably earlier, right around towards the end of the first week, I couldn't get her out of my mind, and I started feeling guilty, like I I had abandoned her, that she was feeling abandoned, and I needed to go and reach out to her so that she felt loved and felt safe. And then I went, wait, why am I feeling like that? She's the one that left me. I didn't do anything. And somebody else that I spoke with said, yeah, that's what they do. That's their induction. They induce that feeling in you because that's how they feel. Even though they push you away, what they're really wanting is they're wanting you to make them feel better. And it may be a test for all we know. But that's number 2, according to this guy, is that you'll have feelings of shame and guilt and feel responsible for their behavior. We've all experienced that. Number 3, paranoia and hypervigilance. And then he says, what's interesting is that is both a sign of BPD and PTSD. So let me be clear about that. A lot of people, a lot of borderlines do this also. They want to say, no, I don't have BPD, I have CPTSD. And my response to that is BPD is a form of PTSD. In other words, you can't be BPD with also having PTSD. You can have PTSD and not be borderline, but you can't be borderline and not have PTSD. It's not possible. So I don't know why people make that distinction. Because, there's the PTSD that comes from actual physical trauma and violence, which I think is worthy of, talking about in its own right. But there's the PTSD that comes from psychological and emotional, not only abuse, but insecurity. And the one thing you're going to get when you date a borderline is absolute psychological insecurity from the get-go. Even while a big smile is pasted on your face, you're going to feel very insecure from the moment that it starts. Whether you're conscious of it or not, that's a whole other issue. So paranoia. I don't know if paranoia is the right word. Paranoia, to me, when I hear the word paranoia, it also carries with it the feeling of negative paranoia, like wanting to blame everybody around them. Maybe he's saying that that's the third sign. I think that comes later. But in the beginning, it's insecurity. It's feeling of, not knowing when it's, the rug's going to get pulled out from underneath you. The lack of safety, just knowing that you're not safe and at any moment, things could go bad, instantly. And the fear of that. Hypervigilance is an interesting word. I like it. It means, to be overly cautious about everything. So you're constantly obsessed over making sure that nothing goes wrong. If I'm understanding how he's using that term. Being so vigilant about everything, really being just hardcore codependent about every little possible thing that could go wrong and making sure that absolutely, trying to think ahead about how you can make sure nothing will ever go wrong. And he says these are both signs of BPD and PTSD. And it's important to understand if you've been in a relationship with an untreated borderline or a toxic borderline, you are suffering from PTSD. Absolutely. Maybe you didn't get beat up, but on a psychological, emotional level, you definitely went through trauma. And the thing that was missing for me in his description was I didn't get the sense that he understood how deep the trauma is for people who are, number one, attracted to borderlines or that borderlines attract, and how deeply connected our sense of safety and security and even our entire identity becomes absolutely anchored in that relationship. The relationship becomes intense and it becomes your whole soul. I mean, very common in the beginning of a relationship with a borderline that both parties are talking about, you're my soulmate. I've been waiting for you for thousands of years. Oh my God, I finally am with the person who truly sees me. One of the biggest red flags, looking back in my past, now that I know what BPD is, but there's been a few close calls. These have been with people who were um, either clients of mine or students of mine. So, of course, I don't get personally involved with clients or students. But very often with clients that I've come to realize afterwards were most likely borderlines or had borderline tendencies, that one of the first things they do is they say, I feel like you're the only person who ever understood me. You're the only person in the world that can truly understand me. And then each time that that's happened, those clients, those students always end up leaving, always end up splitting, flipping out, accusing me of things I didn't say or do, or I betrayed them in some horrific way, and then they're gone. And so that's a big red flag. If you're with somebody and in the first night you're talking to them at dinner and they say, I feel like you're the only person in the world that can truly understand me. You are the only person that gets me. Now, if you've been with somebody for, months or years and they say that, that's different. You've earned that. But when they don't know you, if they've just met you and you're their soulmate and you're the only one that gets them, that's a very bad sign. That is a sign that the borderline is projecting onto you and transferring their infantile love and worship of their parents onto you. That's what that means. It's bad news. It means that they are going to, whatever extent they're worshiping you, they are going to go on the exact opposite, and they're going to hate you just as fiercely as they are worshiping you right now. So that's number 3, paranoia and hypervigilance, both signs of BPD and PTSD. Number 4, and this one was interesting. Maybe it's because things were a little bit different for me. I think also he's talking about the only partners of BPD that end up in therapy. Because this sounds like, very specific scenarios. I didn't go through it, and a lot of people that I deal with on the channel don't go through it. And I think that's because there are far more people who experience being in relationships with borderlines who don't, for whatever reason, don't reach out and get help, and or don't even know that they've been through something that needs psychological attention. And so you've got a lot of walking wounded out there. And I think those are the people that end up finding my channel. Those are the people that end up being the super empaths. They don't ever end up in therapy. They don't even acknowledge that they've been in something that is off the norm, that they've actually been with somebody who has a mental illness. And they then take their codependence, which is now raging, which has been, the fans of it have been flamed, hundreds of times greater than they were aware of, and now they're just loose in the world, sort of flaming with their their super empath abilities. I don't even think they realize what they've experienced. So based on this, again, it sounds like only the very small number of people that actually for some reason end up in therapeutic sessions. So here's number 4. Number 4, the sign that lets you know that you've been or are in a relationship with a borderline is that you experience judgment from friends and family. And that's interesting. I didn't experience that, but then again, I'm, I'm a middle-aged guy, and I don't have to go, I don't have my mom or my dad or things like that. I didn't really experience a lot from my friends, but again, maybe because I'm in a different scenario. But judgment from friends and family, and he gave some examples that I wouldn't have even thought of. That your family starts to judge you for the problems that your borderline is having. So why, what are you doing to hurt her? What are you doing that's making her so insecure? Why aren't you being a good enough partner to them that they're acting this way to you? Or, another more logical one, which would be, well, then if it's so bad, then what the hell are you still doing with them? So that I can understand. But the other thing is that he gave the idea that the partner will start acting out towards family and friends, pushing them away, and acting out with a lot of hypersensitivity, feeling judged and misunderstood, or I got the sense being protective of the borderline, and sort of buying into the idea that they and the borderline and them have to go off alone because nobody understands us. That I can relate to. I can remember feeling when I was with my borderline. I can remember consciously omitting information about the relationship to my therapist, who I was still working with once a month. And I remember telling him all the good things, the love bombing stuff, but the stuff that I knew he wouldn't understand, I remember omitting that, because that's how I felt. It's like he won't understand. We're unique. What we have is different and unique and special. And if I try and explain it, they won't get it. So I just won't explain that part. So that part I can understand. And I can understand in another sense how somebody would be protective of the codependent relationship. And this is, you protect your abuser. This is very common in other kinds of codependent relationships, like with alcoholics and drug addicts, or people who are, just outright abusive. You'll hear the victim say, no, you don't understand. He's just very sensitive, or you don't know what he's like when we're alone. That's not who he really is. They get protective of the abuse. So perhaps he's talking about that. So that's number 4, judgment from friends and family. Number 5, this one is obvious, fear of abandonment. You end up taking on that borderline trait because, and it's not an irrational fear. Unlike with the borderline, it is an irrational fear, because as we prove to them over and over and over again, no matter what they do, we're there for them, or they can hoover us back whenever they want. We obviously aren't abandoning them, even though they keep trying to get us to abandon them. Interesting, today I was watching videos from borderlines talking about splitting. And this one girl was talking about how when she's splitting, her conscious experience is that there's a part of her that's aware that what she's doing isn't accurate, that she's saying horrible and mean things, and she knows that it's not true, and she can't stop herself from acting on that impulse. And the conscious justification she gives herself is, they deserve better. I'm a horrible person and they shouldn't be with me, so I'm going to hurt them so badly that they have to leave, and then that way I won't have to feel guilty, because then they'll be free of me. And it's just, again, not seeing there's some psychopathy there. Borderlines, if you do that, it really is absolutely horrifically cruel to do that. It's when somebody loves you, it's just horrifically cruel to do that to them. And we see that in the movies, when the guy has to, he's going to go jump off a cliff or something, and he wants to get rid of the dog, so he starts throwing rocks at the dog. Go, get away from me. You're no good. I hate you. And we are identifying with the character, so we think, oh, he's doing it out of love. But really, when you think about it, there's just, the person on the other end doesn't understand. There's no way for them to understand. They can only feel hurt by that. And the fact that we're not given the right to decide who we want to be with, you don't need to decide for us whether or not, we want to be with you. That's our decision. You don't have to feel comfortable with it. That's okay. But, don't save us from yourself and in the process do more damage. Anyway. So the fear of abandonment is number 5, which is a sign that says that you are in a relationship with a borderline. Sign number 6 is depression. And then he goes on to say, and I think the reason for that, and I can't remember what he said, but I was shaking my head like, no, you don't get it. He kind of sort of touched on it when he talked about, I believe he talked about hopelessness. I heard a really great definition of depression. And bear in mind, there's a difference between when most people say I'm feeling depressed, it's not clinical depression. What they mean is they feel sad. They feel down, they feel low. They might feel really down, really sad, really low, but it's not depression. Depression is different. Depression, from a psychological perspective, is when you're numb. You've actually gone numb and you are hopeless. You don't have any hope, but it's not like you're crying and going, oh my God, my life is over. You may have bouts of that, but depression itself is when you're numb and you're just not engaged in your life. You don't take care of yourself. You don't care about anything. You can't get out of bed. I don't know what's wrong with me. That's depression. And I heard a psychologist say that the definition of depression was the inability to see a future for oneself. And I thought that was brilliant. It means that you have no hope. It means that you don't, and I remember specifically, especially after the final discard, I remember, not being able to imagine a future for myself, which really frightened me. And the reason that it frightened me is that that's one of the things that I do, as a teacher and a counselor and all that. And people, there's all kinds of things that people hire me to help them with. And one of them is I help people find out what their true career is, how they can make money, how they can be truly happy. And, after my relationship with my borderline, I couldn't. And up until then, I knew I had a method. I know exactly how to get to myself when I am confused and feeling uncomfortable or, whatever it is. I always know how to go in and figure out what is it that I truly want. Because once I figure out what I truly want, then I know exactly what to do. And I see a future for myself and I feel excited and I feel inspired. And so having spent all that time, you can call it a life coach if you want, having spent all that time mastering that for myself and teaching others how to do that, to be in a position when I honestly couldn't, no matter how hard I tried, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had no idea where to go next. And there was just this feeling of hopelessness. And that scared me. I knew I was in real trouble. That was one of the reasons I did the 4 things. And again, remember, this is the channel of the 4 things that you need to do in order to heal from BPD and narcissistic abuse. All right, so that's number 6. The sign that you're with a borderline is depression. Number 7, and this again shows me, I think, this is coming from the experience of a psychologist. It's not coming from the majority of people who actually are the partners of borderlines that survive. I think it's in the minority what he's talking about. And again, from his perspective, because he's a psychologist, he only knows what walks through his door. And if he's reading from books, because he's got a bunch of books that he lists as sources, those are also psychologists, and working in hospitals and things like that. So they only know the ones that show up for whatever reason. And I have some thoughts about that. So number 7 is that the 7th sign that you are dating a borderline is that you're familiar with legal and mental health systems. And he specifically talked about violence. He talked about that if you are in a relationship with a borderline, that you get into arguments and those arguments turn into violence. And so the cops are going to come out because the neighbors are going to call because there's yelling and screaming, or somebody gets injured, and then the borderline will accuse you of attacking them when they're the one that attacked you. And so in any case, they're forced into the legal and the mental health system. They have to deal with the borderline going into some kind of lockdown unit for whatever, or getting whatever. And again, I think that's a small percentage. That didn't happen with me. My borderline and I, we had all the symptoms of, borderline relationship, but, there wasn't physical violence. There wasn't the cops coming, which doesn't make it any less tragic. It's just a different kind of drama. And as I think about it now, I did find myself at one point going with her multiple times to some clinic that she had to go to in order to get her medication. I do remember that. And I do remember her being nervous because she was going to have to go and talk to the state-appointed doctor to get, the med, blah, blah. That's here in Australia. I don't know what it's like in the States. So I guess that does apply to me now that I think about it. Maybe if I was with her longer, more of it would have happened. But I think the way he described it is really, again, it's a small portion. It's not, I don't think it's the majority. But that makes sense. I mean, he's a psychologist. He's only going to see that part. He's not going to see that, the people that don't end up in his office. Doesn't have any experience with that. How is he going to know? Number 8, the sign that you're dating somebody with BPD is reluctance to seek help. Your reluctance to get professional help, to get help from friends, because you're full of shame. You're full of shame. Now, he says, and here's what I think it is. And again, he's doing his best trying to figure it out, but I can tell, I shook my head and I have no idea. It has nothing to do with that. He was actually came up with a rational explanation for it that was really something that goes on in the mind of a rational person. And he shared the example of what he calls unequal damage, where one of his neighbors crashed into his car, but that his car only had minor damage and theirs had much worse. And because it was so minor and they had such horrible damage, he felt bad for them and he didn't make a fuss and said, don't worry about it. And so he makes that, he's kind of saying that's what happens with the partner of the borderline. It's that they've been damaged by it, but because the borderline is so much more screwed up than them, then they're not going to seek help for themselves. And that's not what's happening at all. That gives that gives a rational assumption. He's projecting his rationality onto somebody that's been in an irrational relationship that is in a totally other crazy codependent realm of horror and pain and lunacy. So that's not what's happening at all. It's not this idea of, well, the borderline is more damaged than me, so I'm not going to seek help. No, it's shame. There's deep, deep shame in there, like toxic shame, and not wanting anybody to see what's going on inside. The absolute fear of being found out. Because there's this feeling of not, that they're right, you don't deserve anything. I mean, it was tough. I mean, the only reason I do the 4 things, and I tell you guys to do the 4 things, the only reason I did it is because I've been doing this stuff for 40 years. So if I hadn't had any experience, if I hadn't had any therapy, and if I hadn't had, any experience with the 12 steps, I would not, no way would I have reached out for help. Not because I felt like, she needs it more than I do. It would have been more like just absolute total shame and fear of not wanting people to see all that garbage and not wanting to see it in myself. But I agree with that. I think that's a good sign, the reluctance to seek help. Not only would I say reluctance to seek help, there's an outright hostility. An absolute hostile resistance to seeking help. And one of the ways that's expressed is by people who continuously come on the channel. No matter how long I've been here, new people will show up, and just somebody else showed up again, very passive aggressively accused me of being dangerous for saying that if you've been in a relationship with a borderline, you are codependent. This person saying, that is dangerous. You shouldn't say that to somebody, and then wanted to go on about how victimized they were. And of course, the irony of not realizing that wanting to harp on your lack of responsibility and your incapability to defend your own boundaries and your willingness to continuously be victimized, that doesn't somehow not make you codependent. And again, the same kind of, the grandiosity of saying, no, I understand that many people who do it are codependent and it looks exactly the same, but I'm not. I know that they are. Okay, you are, but I'm not codependent. I'm a victim. Just the inability to see, the rest of us watch and just shake our head. It's like, oh, really? I can quit anytime I want. Glug, glug, glug. So the reluctance to seek help, I would say, is more than reluctance. It's outright hostile resistance to seeking help. Number 9. This is an interesting one, I thought, as well. The 9th sign that you are in a romantic relationship with somebody who has BPD is that you have a backup living arrangement. That you always make sure that you have a place to go because you know that she's going to flip out or he's going to flip out and either kick you out or she's going to leave or something like that, and you're going to need to have some kind of backup living arrangement for yourself. I can understand that. For me, that wasn't really an issue because I was the breadwinner, and of course I was the one paying the rent for the house that we would have lived in. So she goes and leaves and does her own thing and stays with her ex or whatever the hell she did. So it wasn't that I had to leave, have a backup arrangement, but it's still kind of the same where you have to be sort of prepared to just to know that they're not going to stay. They're going to take off. But I can understand in some situations you're going to have to be prepared to make sure that you have a place to go. Because literally at the drop of a hat, you could find yourself out on the street. That things like that did happen with me, with her, so I can see that. Always having a backup living arrangement. Always having a backup everything. Knowing that you cannot depend on your partner to be there for you in any kind of way. That you are going to have to be 100% self-sufficient and making sure that you're able to take care of yourself, as well as knowing that you are going to have to be available 24/7 to take care of them when they need you. When they need you, you better well be there for them in whatever way they need. But you cannot depend on them to be there for you in any way. They might. Doesn't mean that they won't be supportive. It just means that you can't depend on that. That can leave at any point in time. And then here's a really interesting one. And as I look at it, I can understand it. But again, this is coming from a psychologist who is either looking at, I'm assuming, his experience of the people that he encounters who have been in relationships with borderlines, and or from the material that he's reading from other psychologists. So the 10th sign that you are having, that you're in a relationship with somebody who has BPD, is the expectation of sudden death. I had never thought about that, but the more I do, the more that makes absolute total sense. I don't remember what he said. He went on to say, and I think that is, and again, he made this very rational explanation of what he thought it might be. And again, I shook my head and I said, no, that's not it. The expectation of sudden death is that to understand what it's like for a codependent in a relationship with a borderline, in the very beginning, in the love bombing phase, what ends up happening is that the codependent ends up in a very short amount of time, sometimes instantaneously. There's this instantaneous experience of, oh my God, I finally found my, what really is your mother. I finally found my mommy. But it's really, I finally found my soulmate. And you completely invest your entire identity into the idea of them saving you. And of course, what the borderline wants is the borderline wants you to save them. But in the beginning, because they are projecting onto you, they project onto you that they're going to save you. They're going to be the savior. I can still see it. I wasn't in this house where I'm at now, but I can remember in my other house up the street, my borderline wearing an apron, looking like a 50s, housewife, cooking me food and cookies, and looking back and just wanting, looking back on it, she's wanting to look like the perfect partner and giving me the food and then rubbing my feet and literally tears coming down my face because, oh my God, I'm being treated so well. And this is what I get to, I'm already planning. This is what I get for the rest of my life. I am so signed up for this. And so I don't know that this psychologist understands that because he hasn't experienced it. But the expectation of sudden death is because it's literally worse than death. When the person that you've volunteered and given your entire essence to, and at the same time, they have seduced it out of you. So that is part of it. Borderlines seduce you. They work very hard to make you feel safe. Seduction is not a bad thing, by the way. Seduction is only a bad thing when it doesn't work out the way you want. When seduction works out the way you want, it's a necessary thing. Seduction is part of life. And we don't fall in love and get married and have kids unless we're seduced into it, at the very least, by the chemicals that go through our brain. So there's nothing wrong with somebody seducing somebody if they're both willing partners, and it ends up being if they ended up following through and staying consistent with that seduction, there'd be absolutely nothing wrong. In fact, it would be a very beautiful thing. But when the codependent, which again, the codependent has within them, they've probably buried it deep within them. There is a pain that is so deep and so fundamental that it might even be hidden away from them. They may have built up a bunch of layers of protection from it. They're comfortable with their life. They're self-sufficient. I've had good relations. I hear this all the time. Stop calling me a codependent. I had good relationships. I was married before, blah, blah, blah. She did it to me. Well, the thing is, she can't seduce you into that unless it's there. And the borderline, because of the depth of their trauma and their pain and their sadness and their emptiness, they are brilliant at being able to navigate past your psychological defenses and get to the deepest part of your pain that you haven't even experienced yet. Your mommy issues that you haven't even had the ability, that have been covered up since you were 4 years old. They're going to find that, they're going to gingerly and tenderly bring it out, and they're going to fluff it up, and then you're going to fall so deeply in need and in love with them that when you've been devalued, all it takes is once. People have asked me, how can you know so much about this and you were only with your borderline for, such a short period of time? Because it only takes once. You've been devalued and idealized and devalued and idealized hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. You've been doing it for years. So what? It's just a repeat of the same thing. It's just as traumatic the first time as it is the 100th time. Maybe that's not actually true, but the first one is as deep as psychological experience as the same depth of experience you have if you've been with somebody for 10 years. And if you've been pulled in deep, and if you've attached to somebody's psyche and ego to, velcroed to the depth of your identity, which is what happens the very first time. If you get with a borderline, it's because you are waiting for this, consciously or unconsciously, and you get velcroed to them, and you totally identify with them being mommy. They are your source. They are your identity. They are your worth and your value. And all it takes is just one devaluation and you're crushed. It's over. And so this expectation of sudden death is that you die on a deep level every time they split on you, every time they devalue you. It's that big of a deal. And of course, what it means is that you have an unresolved psychological issue yourself, which we call codependence. If you relate to everything I've said, you cannot at the same time tell me you're not a codependent. Because people who aren't codependent don't have that experience. They don't. Somebody who's not codependent does not become completely fused to somebody simply because they were love bombed. And of course, the borderline's not going to love bomb you if you're not codependent anyway, because they're not going to be attracted to you. If you're a self-empowered, self-individuated person, they will, at very least, you will be invisible to them. More than likely, they will feel uncomfortable around you. They won't like you for some reason. They may be intimidated by you. If they look at you and their eyes get big and their eyes dilate and they look at you and start hearing music, it's because they see themselves in you. And if you don't understand that, you're in denial. Sorry, but that's just a fact. And again, everything I say is also true about me. So don't get mad at me. I don't know who you are. I can't see your face. I don't know your name. I don't even know you exist. If I'm describing you, I'm describing myself as well. And if you're hearing that, and then the thing that makes you upset is that I say you're a codependent, and your response is to feel defensive and to feel attacked, and I am unsafe. You called me a word. It means you got it. Because people who don't have it won't understand what I'm talking about. They might feel for me. They might have empathy. They might be able to, kind of grasp, what that must be like, but they won't identify with it. If you identify with it, it's because you got it. All right. So those are my thoughts on that. I thought that was an interesting, looking at it from a different perspective. And, I thought that was interesting. So those are my thoughts about it. You can have your own thoughts. I'm interested in you putting in the comment section, not necessarily in the chat section, but putting in the comment section how you relate to those 10 things. Let me read them off just without going into them again. So the 10 things are: number 1, unsure how you relate to your partner's behavior. How did you deserve their treatment, both positive and negative? Number 1, you're unsure how you deserved your treatment. Number 2, feelings of shame and guilt, obviously. Number 3, paranoia and hypervigilance, both signs of BPD and PTSD. Number 4, experience judgment from friends and family. Number 5, fear of abandonment. Number 6, depression. Number 7, you become familiar with the legal and mental health system. Number 8, reluctance to seek help. Number 9, having a backup living arrangement. And number 10, expectation of sudden death. And what I didn't say was, obviously, the expectation of sudden death is that's what happens every single time. When we are devalued and split on, it feels like it's killing us. And I got to be very real with you about this. That is not nothing. I can remember feeling in my body, I could feel the anxiety was affecting me so badly. I knew that if I didn't do something about it, it was going to give me cancer. I could feel it. I say that knowing somebody who, a very conscious person, by the way, married a borderline, had 2 kids with her, was with her for 10 years. As you can imagine, things went very south, and they're still involved in each other's life. And he is struggling with life-threatening cancer. I know exactly where he got it. So, again, that's just my uneducated, unmedical opinion. But that feeling of the expectation of sudden death, when you're with an untreated toxic borderline, it literally is dangerous to your physical health. And the feeling that you have is because you are dying. Let's bear in mind what BPD is, because the codependent actually ends up getting a form of BPD. And as this is me talking now, as I've heard other psychologists say, the borderline is a failed narcissist. They tried to create the narcissistic firewall, and they were incapable of making it complete. So they bounce back and forth between psychopathic narcissism and BPD, infantile need. They bounce back and forth between the two, and there's a border in the middle, so they're borderline. The borderline is a failed narcissist. The codependent is a failed borderline. They're not, those of us who are codependent, we don't have a mental disorder. We don't dissociate. We don't have a lot of the same things that constitute a mental disorder, but we have everything else. The horrific pain, the emptiness, the need. And the reason why I bring that up is because what borderlines and narcissists have barely survived is that if an infant is not loved, like what will kill an infant the fastest is a lack of attention. You can feed it, you can wipe its ass, but if you don't do anything else and you just leave it alone, it will die. It is a horrific experience for an infant not to constantly be interacted with and loved. When that doesn't happen, the borderline is constantly, the reason why they have so much anxiety, and they do, some borderlines, there's sometimes they have so much anxiety, they're throwing up all the time, they have nausea, they have all kinds of major serious, nervous system problems because they're so anxious all the time. It's because they were on the verge of death as infants. And that's carried through. They never got past that. They're constantly in that state. They're reliving it. That's why I have nothing but compassion for them. I can't imagine a worse experience. So if you're the partner of one, you end up taking that on, because what the borderline unconsciously wants to do, the abuse that they give you, they're not consciously trying to do this, but the unconscious motivation is, I want to take all of this horrific pain, this feeling of impending death, and I want to give it to you, and then I'm going to run away. And that's what they call monkey branching, what I call trampolining. When they devalue you, it's because they've got another person, the knight in shining armor, that they're going to go to, and he's going to save you. And now they project onto you all of their self-hatred because they finally see themselves in you, and they're going to give you all of the horrible garbage inside of them. And their plan is then they're going to rise to the stars and go to the castle, and they'll be free. And they're hoping that you will relieve them of that. And it works, because what works is that you end up getting it. They don't get rid of it, they just spread it to you. But it was already there in you. It may not have been fully realized yet, but as a codependent, there is some part of you that has that same feeling of, if I'm not seen, if I'm not loved, if I don't get validation in some way, I'm going to die. And so the expectation of sudden death is that you're living it. The borderline has stimulated that in you. That deep, failed borderline within you is brought out and birthed, and then on top of that, they dump their stuff on you, and you take it on, and you become a borderline. And that feeling of the expectation of sudden death. So I found that very interesting that he would say that. Anyway, that's number 10, expectation of sudden death. All right, so I'm happy to take any questions if there are any. I'm happy to not take any questions. By the way, what are the 4 things? Bear in mind, the name of this channel is The 4 Things That Heal BPD and NPD Abuse. If you've been in a romantic relationship with a borderline, I only know of one way to heal. And my guarantee to you is that if you do these 4 things with everything that you have in you, at some point you will completely heal from the trauma and the pain that you experienced in that one relationship. I can't guarantee anything else, but that I can guarantee you. And that's important because the people who, in my experience, who are codependents, who don't do this work, they very often never heal, or they never completely heal. There are people listening to me. I know there have been people who contact me. They've been out of the relationship for months, years, decades. They still wake up in the middle of the night. They still wonder. They still feel bad. They still have shame. They still have guilt. They still have rage. They still have anger. They still miss them. They still freak out that they're going to find them someday. Any feelings along those lines, whatever that is, it means you're not healed. Because the relationship with a borderline in a romantic relationship, when they're untreated, you've got to treat it like an infection. It will not go away on its own. It's an infection that has to be dealt with. You have to take antibiotics or it will not go away. And the antibiotics in this case are the 4 things. It's not 1 thing or 2 things or 3 things. They are 4 things. And if you do not do them, in my experience, it is very unlikely you will heal. Is there another way to do it? I have no idea. I only know what I know. But again, you go to the doctor's office and you need penicillin, and they give you a bottle of penicillin. They say, here you go, take this, and you'll get rid of whatever your bacterial infection is. Does that mean it's the only way? No, but it's the only one we know of. And it's quite certain if you don't do anything, this infection could kill you. So not doing the 4 things, assuming that you believe me, which is fine if you don't, but not doing the 4 things is like taking that bottle of antibiotics and putting it on the shelf and looking at it every day. And then you come on here and I say, I know you haven't done the 4 things, right? And you say, well, I have. I've done number 1 and number 3, and I've done a little bit of 2. But I don't want to do 4, or I don't want to do 2 because, and I say, that's like sitting around and looking at the bottle and reading it. Did you take your antibiotics? No, but I read the label. In fact, I read the label about 3 or 4 times. I took it out. I smelled. It smells kind of funky, so I didn't feel like taking it. But I mean, I got it there. I've been looking at it. That's what I hear when I hear you say, I've been working on the 4 things. I've done a couple of them. You got to do all 4. What are they? Number 1. Okay, what is it? That's right. No contact. That means not just that you don't contact them. It means you make it impossible for them to contact you. You throw your phone in the river if you have to. You block Facebook, phone, text, YouTube, email. You move if you have to. You move to another location. You get a restraining order. You do whatever the hell it takes, but you make it impossible for them to contact you. That's no contact. Anything less than that is not no contact. Number 2, you work all 12 steps of coda.org with a sponsor. You can't do it alone. You can't do it by reading it and thinking it through. No, you actually have to sit down with a sponsor and do it with a sponsor. And then you sponsor someone else in the 12 steps. That's number 2. If you don't do that, you haven't done number 2. Number 3, you work with a psychologist who understands cluster B personality disorders. So you can look at your unconscious mommy issues and then work some steps on it. And then number 4, daily meditation, which is really just step 11 in the 12 steps. Those are the 4 things. That's what this channel is about. I'm really glad if you come on here and you listen to me, whatever the hell it is that I'm doing, and that makes you feel connected and it helps you and you feel better. That's awesome. Now take that feeling and do the 4 things. If you don't, if you just watch it and think that that's what's going to make you better, you're wrong. I wish I were that powerful, but I'm not. I don't have the ability to heal you. Listening to me and relating to me is just to get you in the door. My goal is for you to stop watching my channel and live your life. My goal is for you to be able to be there for somebody else the same way I'm trying to be there for you. I have no interest in being an expert or a guru. There's nothing I'm saying that you can't figure out by doing the same thing I've done. If you want what I have, you do what I do. That's how it works. All right. Having said that, let me take a look and see if there's any questions. I'm going to look for the questions first. Silver Velvet question, what is the best way to go no contact with the BPDX? I don't know that there is a best way. Here's the thing, there's nothing easy about any of this. There's never a good time. There's never a convenient way. It's always going to be horrible. If for no other reason, because it's going to be the most difficult thing you've ever done. You've been programmed to feel as though you can't live without them and to feel that they can't live without you. It's your job to take care of them. And that your whole entire identity is going to be wrapped up in staying in contact. And that's the same as if you were addicted to heroin. It's the same as if you're an alcoholic, a drug addict, a gambling addict. You know, look, I'm going to quit after this one. All I need, I can have 1 beer. I'm fine. I'll just one more time. I'll quit tomorrow. It's the exact same thing. In fact, it's, the chemicals in the brain, what they call a trauma bond, is an addiction. There's a chemical process going on in your body and your nervous system associated with survival. Your unconscious mind feels that you won't survive without them. And it creates an addiction. So it's going to be the worst thing you've ever gone through in your life, going no contact. The most difficult, most challenging experience. You're going to hate every second of it, and you're going to go through withdrawals. What's the best way? The one that works. If you want to tie yourself to a chair and lock yourself up for a week and, tell everybody to take your phones away, whatever the hell it takes, man. So I wish I could make it easy for you, but, what is the best way to go no contact with the BPDX? I'm not kidding when I say throw your phone in the river. You have to make it impossible for them to contact you. Let's see, what else do you say? If in my case, he's the one that ghosted me and discarded me without warning, what difference does that make? That doesn't mean anything. How does that make anything different? You still have to do the same thing. You then have to block his phone, you block his email, you block his text, you block his Facebook, you block whatever way he contacts you. And you don't do things like check up on his Facebook to see who he's with. You don't connect in any way. You don't find out about him, you don't ask about him. But the fact that he ghosted you doesn't mean anything. Because if what I'm hearing you say is, well, he ghosted me, so I don't have to do anything. He broke contact with me, so I'm not going to do anything. Which doesn't change anything because inside of you, you're still connected. What you have to break is the internal connection within you. And when you make it impossible to contact you, make it impossible for them to contact you, it's meaningless whether they try to contact you or not. That has nothing to do with it. Like when I went no contact with my borderline ex, there's a very good chance that she has not tried to contact me. But that's irrelevant. Because if I hadn't done that, I would have been waiting. I could have told myself I'm fine without her, I'm dating somebody else now. I could have told myself that. But the part of me would still be waiting for her to contact me. And the fact that I have made it impossible to the best of my ability for her to contact me, I mean, I'm sure she could have if she tried hard enough. But the fact that I made it as impossible as I could, I was sending a message to myself, because that part of you will go, yeah, but what if? What if she tries to call me? What if she tries to text me? What if she's gone into therapy? And what if she found my $500 that's missing? I mean, you're going to come up with whenever you're thinking like that, you're still in contact with them. And you will have the same effect. You will end up either, you'll stay in that for years, or you'll attract somebody else. Going full no contact is absolutely essential. The person I told you about didn't do that. They are in contact with their ex, even though they're not together. And he hasn't asked for my opinion, but if he were to ask, I would say, dude, you got to completely break that off. You can't have any contact with that person. It's killing you. So that's my response to you is, what's the best way? You go no contact as if you expect that they are going to mow you down, that they're going to blow up your phone, blow up your email, they're going to knock on your door. You act as if that's what's just about to happen, and you make that impossible. When you've done that, then you can say you've gone no contact. The fact that they ghosted you is meaningless, because they're going to be back. Unless it was a final discard, which is unlikely, they will be back. And if you just sit back and don't do anything, they will be back and they will hoover you, and you will go right back with them. But if they've ghosted you, then you have you don't have to go through the difficulty of having to tell them or having to ghost them. They've ghosted you, so there's, it's on them. Now you just sever all the connections. They come back looking for you and they can't find you. That's not your fault. They're the one that left. So there's no guilt on you. What else? Should you give him the last message? No. Why would you do that? He's already ghosted you. He's already given you what you're asking me is, you saying, can I please contact him again? Let's be honest, what you really want, and I know because I've been there, what you really want is to implant in him, you better hurry up. I'm still here. I'm threatening to leave you. I want you to react. So again, just think about what you just asked me. It doesn't make any sense. The person that was abusive to you, who didn't see you, who didn't appreciate you, who didn't love you, who treated you like crap, has ghosted you, which is a message in and of itself that you have no value to me. I want nothing to do with you. Why would you tell them anything? What do you owe that person that you have to tell them or notify them? Like they're going to go, oh, I wish you had told me. Yeah, I ghosted you, but you could have at least told me that you were going to go no contact. And it doesn't make any sense. It's all coming from your need. You're trying to set up a scenario where you can get them back again. I'm right. And then you say, or I need to just block him without any warning, without any last message, since he also discarded me without any. Yeah. So yeah, you get it. Okay, any more questions? No, I don't see another question. Peliac. All right, so again, I can tell if you guys haven't done the work. If you're new to my channel, obviously you haven't had time to do the work. If I give you a hard time, if I reflect back to you and if I sound like I'm mocking your questions, it's not because I don't understand or don't relate. It means I'm wanting to show you how irrational your thought process is. I'm wanting to show you how insane you are at the moment. Because in your mind right now, what you're asking makes sense. But it's actually very twisted, and it's a sign of somebody who's in deep pain, deep denial. You're still in crazy town because you were with a borderline and they live in crazy town. So you're still in crazy town, and I'm putting a mirror up going, do you see how insane your thinking is right now? How totally irrational this is? So Peliak, if you have a question, what helps is if you write the word question in all caps so that I can see it. And you ask, what do NPD and BPD couples look like? And my first question to you is, what difference does that make? This channel is for people who don't have a personality disorder, who are with a borderline. What does that have to do with you? Are you a BPD or an NPD? No. Let me guess. You want to know what's going on with your BPDX who you think is with a narcissist. Am I wrong? The reason why I say that is because borderlines like two kinds of tasty morsels to eat. The first one is you. They like a juicy super empath. But they also like the savory, you're the sweet. They like the savory as well, and that is the narcissist. And they bounce back between the two. And depending on who they're with, if they're with the narcissist, they will complain about how weak and wimpy and how needy the borderline, Freudian slip, how needy you were, the codependent. They're going to talk about, yeah, he reminded me of my dad, and they'll say that a lot. Guys, they'll say that a lot. If your borderline says you remind them of their dad, that's bad news. It's time to get out. That means that you'll never, ever, ever be somebody that they'll want to love. If they say you remind me of my dad, that's very bad news. But of course, in the beginning, they wanted to call you daddy. That was a good thing. Well, that's going to turn bad real quick. The very thing that the borderline loves about you in the beginning is the thing they're going to hate about you when they discard you. When they meet you, they're going to go, oh, you're like my daddy. Can I call you daddy? And then when they discard you, they're going to go, you remind me of my father. There's just no pleasing him. So what do NPD and BPD couples look like? Because borderlines like narcissists. And so this is a very codependent thing. You can tell me if I'm wrong. I experienced it. My borderline ex told me of her numerous narcissist boyfriends, one in which she was with for a very long time, who she had, who actually trained her in all this crazy kinky sex. And I remember feeling so upset that he got to have, that much sex with her all the time. And she was rejecting me, when she wasn't in the mood. And that he could demand her to do this, that, and the other thing. And of course, I only know what she told me. And I remember having times wishing I could turn myself into a narcissist, because then maybe I could control her. Maybe she wouldn't leave then. So what borderlines like is they like relationships where there's no hope of intimacy. Narcissists are incapable of intimacy. So this keeps the borderline constantly triggered, chasing after them, trying to get their love. Also, because they're being abused, it also triggers them to try and win. They're also looking for the time when they can get the narcissist off guard, get the narcissist to fall in love with them so that they can then turn around and abuse the narcissist, which they do. And when that happens, it actually destroys a narcissist. So borderlines are bad for everybody. You're a narcissist, you're a codependent, borderline's gonna devour you. So I think that's why you asked, right? You wrote something and then you retracted it. So I'm okay if I'm wrong, but I'm willing to bet I'm right. Let's see. Silver Velvet says, thank you. I realize now that me trying to give him the last message is because of my codependency. Yep. As to, I feel bad even if he is the one that ghosted me. It's irrational. Yeah, you feel bad, but it's not just that you feel bad. Again, you can correct me if I'm wrong. It's also because you want him. You still want him. And, codependents never do anything unless, of course, they're in some kind of state of recovery. But if they're triggered, which you're triggered if you're still talking about him and asking about him, bear in mind, codependents, when they're triggered, never do anything unconditional. I know you think you do, and I know you portray yourself that way, and I know you've been programmed to act that way and to believe you're doing it, but the truth is you never do anything unconditionally when it comes to your borderline. You're always doing it to get a connection and a response. Your unconditional love is really because you want them to love you unconditionally, and you hope that you wear them down enough, that you'll pour so much unconditional love on them that it'll melt their boundaries, and then they'll go, okay, I love you forever. I know that's why you do it. And so even though part of you is ready to leave and they ghosted you, your desire to reach out to them and let them know because you feel guilty. Remember, guilt is rage turned inward. So if you feel guilty, it means you are rageful at the person you feel guilty towards. It's unconscious rage. So if you're doing it because you feel guilty, it means you still want him. Because here's what happens with guilt. When you're still in it, or you're just out of it, and you're feeling guilty, you feel like they need you, that you feel responsible for them, and you have all those horrible guilt kinds of responsibility feelings, it's for what I just said. You want them back, you want them to love you, and it's a way of trying to control them, to manipulate them. And again, it's manipulation. You're going to send him, even though he's ghosted you, you're going to send him a message telling him, I'm breaking it off with you. But it's really a manipulation. You're trying to get his attention and trying to get him to chase back after you again, no matter what you tell yourself. Because the kindest thing to do is to give him what he's just asked for. He ghosted you, which means he's saying, I don't want anything to do with you. In fact, I don't even want to talk to you about it. The kindest, most loving thing is to give him exactly what he asked for. So what do? You do the opposite. You reach out to him and you say, I'm just letting you know I'm going to leave. I mean, it's your last chance. I mean, I don't want anything to do with you, but it's your last chance. I'm just letting you know. It's a manipulation. So the other thing that happens is after time goes on, so let's just go forward. Here's what would most likely happen, which happens with many people. Maybe it wouldn't happen with you, but it happens with most people. They start off in that place where you are now. They go through withdrawals. They're full of pain. They're full of guilt, responsibility. They long for the other person. What could I have done differently? If only I had done this. And that could last who knows how long. But when the reality starts to set in that they're not coming back, oh my God, I just looked at their Facebook. He's married to somebody else and he has a kid. Oh my God, he's never coming back. That guilt is going to then show its true face, and then you're going to be full of rage and you are going to want justice. And instead of coming on here and talking about how I feel guilty, you're going to write long paragraphs about, I gave him my whole life and they're just narcissists. They're the most evil people. They do it on purpose. I can't believe that the universal, you'll be like that, which is how you actually feel right now. But because there's hope that maybe he'll come back, your brain turns it into guilt and responsibility. But that guilt and responsibility will turn into self-righteous, seeking revenge. And you'll talk about how evil the borderline is. So whenever I see somebody on here who's full of rage and has a resentment, I say, if you are rageful and you judge the borderline as being evil, it means you still want them back. And the reason for that is because if you understand that the borderline has a mental illness, the borderline really, when they discard you, you don't exist, because their mental illness is such that if you're not right in front of them, you stop existing. That's a real thing. It's not that they have become these evil geniuses that have learned how to, they laugh, ha ha ha. That person doesn't, maybe they might be like that, but that's not what happens most of the time. Is that the moment that you leave the room, you literally don't exist anymore in their brain. And whoever's left in the room, that person exists. Oh, now you're my boyfriend. Oh, you're back now. Oh, okay, yeah, you're my girlfriend now. Oh, sorry, she's back now. I don't need you. They're like that. They don't have the same value on that. Of course, they want to be treated that way. They want to be remembered. They don't want to be forgotten and disposed of. But they're a 3-year-old. They don't know the difference. Now, if you understand that without any attachment, then you don't take it personally when they ghost you. Your boyfriend ghosted you because you left the room. It could have been literally, I kid you not, it could have been because you left the room. And you stopped existing. It could have been a bunch of other things, it probably was, but it could have been just that. That's a mental illness we're talking about. That is a lot different than somebody who I've got some attachment disorder. I have some difficulties with intimacy. I have a problem with commitment. It's a lot different than that. It's sometimes just as simple as that. They woke up the next day and they feel differently. The night before, he said to you, I love you, I'm going to marry you, you and I, we're going to have kids together, and we're going to buy a house, and we're going to do all, and you took it and you said, oh, he's okay now, he's finally committed, we're going to be okay. You went to sleep, and you woke up the next day, you're still the same person, and you remembered what happened, and it still has meaning to you. He went to sleep, his identity, because he doesn't have one, disappeared. The moment that the feeling left, he had a bad dream. He woke up, he looked at you, and he didn't know who you were. He packed up his stuff and he left. You didn't exist. If somebody asked him, well, what about what you said last night? He'll say, I don't remember. Or he'll say, to himself, he'll say, I remember somebody that looked like me having that conversation, but I don't relate to that person, so it wasn't me. So lots of times when borderlines say, I never said that, it's not because they are lying to you, or it's because they honestly believe that. It's because, no, they remember that somebody with their face and their name and their voice said that, but they don't have any emotional memory of it. They might have a fuzzy memory that it took place, like a movie they watched last night, but they don't identify with it. They don't have an identity. So when you go back and you say, wait a minute, last night you said you were going to marry me. They said, I never said that. I never told you that. You're lying to me. It's because this is insanity. We're talking about somebody who has a mental illness. If you get that, you're not going to waste any time feeling that they're evil, because an evil person is rational. If they're evil, it means that they planned it out. They thought about luring you in so they could make you vulnerable, and then they feasted on you, and now they are relishing in the pain that they've caused. No, that's somebody who's rational. And somebody who thinks that way is hoping that the person will wake up and go, oh my God, I have been so evil. I now repent of my evilness, and now I'm going to put that same effort into coming back and being good to you. Whenever you think somebody is evil, it means you still love them and you want them to be rational. When you realize you're with somebody that has a mental illness, you can't hold them accountable. You can't, because they never were there with you to begin with. It wasn't them. They weren't really there. What else? Peliac. Okay, you're not hearing me. So let me say it again. Peliac. This channel is about helping you to recover from the abuse that you received from a narcissist or a borderline. How that starts is I talk to you about the borderline so that you can connect and relate. And then you want to go heal. How a borderline abuses the narcissist doesn't apply to you unless you're a narcissist. Are you a narcissist? I'm willing to bet you're not. Am I wrong? Did you come on here because you were abused by a borderline and you were discarded, and now they're with a narcissist and you can't get it out of their mind and you want to figure out what's going on? And now you want me to tell you how the borderline abuses the narcissist? How does that help you recover? You're missing the point of this channel. The point of this channel is for you to do the 4 things. For you to look at yourself. What got you into the relationship? What was your unresolved childhood, narcissistic, selfish, self-damaging issues that got you there? The moment that your borderline leaves your life, whatever they do is none of your business. And it has no reflection on you. And there's not, I mean, what are you going to gain if I tell you that? I mean, I can. Trust me, I would enjoy going into detail, what the borderline does to abuse the narcissist. I've done it many times. But how will that help you? How will that help you distance yourself from them, heal from them? It sure as hell won't help you get them back, because that's what you're really asking me. You don't realize it. But that question, if we really sit down and analyze it and surgically tear it apart, what's underneath that is, I want my borderline back. And so I'm going to obsess over what is it about the narcissist? And you can correct me if I'm wrong. So it's not helpful to you. The answer to your question is do the 4 things. You don't want to do the 4 things? Welcome to the channel. I'm glad you're here, but there's nothing I can do for you. I can't help you. The only thing I can help you with is doing the 4 things. That's it. That's where your healing is. It's not in any of these other questions you're asking right now. What else? Silver Velvet is, I guess, saying that I'm accurate. Philip Anderson says my vids help him a lot with the understanding of everything he's been through. I'm really glad. I mean, I love doing it, and it's something I'm good at. I'm really good at doing that kind of stuff. But the truth is, all of my analysis of other people's psychological underpants really isn't what's going to help you. Again, what helps is if you feel a connection, that feeling of connecting with me, or if you feel validated, or you don't feel alone, take that feeling and go do the 4 things. The feeling that you have now, when I get off of here tomorrow, it's not really going to help you in the long run. It's not that it hurts you, but it's really not. There's what I'm doing here. There's no cure in what I'm doing here. The cure is in the 4 things. But having said that, I'm really glad that the channel helps, and that is my goal. All right, so Peliac. So this is the other thing that's important, is to be honest about yourself. So I knew there was something in your question that you weren't being authentic about. And usually it's people are wanting to find out my borderline is with a narcissist. And so I wasn't sure, but there was something, which now you're revealing, which is that I was discarded after he abused, but before leaving, she accused me of being a narcissist. Well, that's because she's a borderline, and borderlines are the masters of projection. So here's a general note. If you remember everything that your borderline has said about you, the majority of it is exactly how they feel about themselves, and or what they're accusing you of is exactly what they are doing to you. And there is nobody that does it better than a borderline. What is the borderline most afraid of? Being abandoned. What is the borderline best at doing? Abandoning you. So she accused you of being a narcissist. It's because she's a narcissist. Borderline personality disorder, if people truly understood what I'm about to say, they would never spend any time thinking about their borderline ex or ever wanting to be with a borderline again. But this is a fact. Modern psychology has come to the conclusion that there's only personality disorders, and there's just varying levels of personality disorder, which means that borderline personality disorder is a form of narcissistic personality disorder. They are also called secondary psychopaths. Bear in mind that not all narcissists are psychopaths. Psychopaths are like serial killers are psychopaths. So the secondary psychopath means that beautiful, sweet borderline with those big giant eyes and the cute face and the loving and when they're the other side of that, just on the other side of that is a psychopath waiting to absolutely horrifically destroy you with no empathy for you whatsoever. The borderline doesn't sense that. They're full of infantile need and love. They're overwhelmed with their feelings of love for you, which is why they're happy to come on here and say, I'm not a psychopath. I have love, until I say, yeah, well then why did you destroy that person? Because people who love you don't do that. Love doesn't disappear the moment your feelings disappear. So just because you have loving feelings doesn't mean that you love them. The action, the verb of loving. You can feel love and then you can act with love. And you can act with love and have zero feelings of love. And that is true love. And that's what, when you marry somebody, in sickness and in health, in rich and for poor, happy and sad, good times and bad. It means regardless of how you feel, sunshine, you're committing to act lovingly towards this person no matter how you feel. Are you going to do that? Borderlines don't do that. When they tell you they love you, they mean, I have seriously gushy feelings for you right now. But don't hold me to anything. Let's just be friends. I don't want to be in a committed relationship. Let's just be friends. But right now, let's go have sex and pretend we're together. And then tomorrow, I want you to give me the right to do whatever the hell I want. And don't hold me to it. I told you we were just friends. Why are you so upset? Borderlines are narcissists. They're secondary narcissists. They're covert narcissists. It means that the narcissist is there, and if you understand that, if calling somebody a narcissist makes you go, oh, they have a mental illness, I can't depend on anything they say or they do. They're not aware of objective reality in the same way that I am. If that word gives you the ability to separate, then start calling them that, because they are. The more, everybody who asks me, and they have many times, how can I separate the borderline from the narcissist? Or they'll say this one, which shows their ignorance of what BPD is. They'll say, I think my borderline is also comorbid narcissistic personality disorder. They don't understand. There's really no such thing. You got one, you got the other. You can't have one without the other. But we're easily deceived because we interact with the cute little borderline, and there's no reason for us to think that there's a narcissist on the other end. There's no reason for us to think that. So it's helpful to do that. And I'm sorry if that hurts the borderline's feelings, but the good news is that the borderlines can get into some recovery if they want. Okay, let's see what else. So if you got a question, again, it helps if you write the word question, Ivan Yorison. I have a hard copy of the 12 Steps Workbook, Minnesota model. I don't know what that means. Is the CODA workbook very different from Narcotics Anonymous? You also worked with the NA books, right? I did not work with the NA books. I don't care where you get the 12 steps from. My personal feeling is that the original blue book of AA, those 12 steps, that is like, the best ones. I don't know the workbook that you're talking about. It could be amazing. It could be crappy. There are workbooks that I've looked at that to me are just, I don't know. They're overthinking it and all of that. For instance, let's take the fourth step. I made a video on the fourth step. So that to me is the most important. In fact, I just did one today, just to give you an idea how important the fourth step is. Fourth step is real simple. It's not writing a big novel about your life and all that. People think inventory, a detailed inventory, and they write this big novel about my big Hollywood movie. No, the fourth step is real simple. You make a list of your resentments. If you're codependent, you've got far more resentments than you realize. You've got tons of resentments. And so you've got 4 columns, and you write, in the first column is who you're mad at. Second column is why, and you just write in a sentence, she ghosted me. You don't write in, we were going to get married and she told me that I was the best person in the world and then she changed it. No, you just write, she ghosted me. The third column is what it affects. And there's a list of things that it affects. Self-esteem, finances, sex life, I forget them all, but there's a list of things. There's just a short list of things that have to do with your self-preservation instincts. And so what it affects, you write those down. She ghosted me. It affects my self-esteem. It affects my security. It affects my sex life. Maybe it affects my finances. You write down those things. And then the fourth column is, what was my part? Well, if she's not a borderline, then you can look at what you did to get her to ghost you. If she was a borderline, then your part is, I chose to be with somebody who had a mental illness where they leave you. That's your part. You chose to be with her. I wanted to find somebody that, she reminded me of my mom. For me, my borderline ex triggered my issues having to do with my fiance who passed away. I was in horrific mourning pain, even 2 years after, about her dying on me. And I was wanting her back. Borderline saw that, went and tried to become that, and I bought it. So my part in it, I was trying to project onto her my fiance who I was still mourning. That's my part. I don't know what your part is. And then after you do look at that, then you look at fears that aren't associated with it. So then you write down any fears that you can think of that don't make any sense, that have to do with, he ghosted me. I'm afraid nobody will ever love me. I'm afraid I'm not attractive. I'm afraid I'm going to suddenly die tomorrow. I'm afraid a giant zit is going to, appear on my forehead and I'll start speaking French. It doesn't matter. You write all that down. That's one resentment for one person. It's the 4 columns plus the fears. And then there's a sexual inventory where you can look at your selfishness regarding sex, which you do along that. Then you take that, you've written all that down, your sponsor should have sat you down and told you what I just told you, and then you go to your sponsor and then you read that. It probably takes 30 seconds to read all of it. I'm mad at my boyfriend. He ghosted me. It affects my self-esteem, my security, my finances, my part. I chose to expect somebody with a mental illness to love me when I knew he was incapable of it. Fears associated with it. I'm afraid I'm going to turn into a mushroom and start speaking French. Blah, blah, blah. You share that. You have no idea why you're talking about it. And then your sponsor says whatever they say. I understand. Or they yawn and they go, okay, next, whatever it is. Maybe, they'll have something really wonderful to say that will help you pull it all together. But what happens when you do that is that when you're done with that, you're going to realize that you're not a victim. And it's not like an awareness, it's just sort of this feeling, because what you've done is you've just now shifted everything in your brain. And your brain starts seeing things differently, and then you're going to see, as time goes on, you're going to realize, I have control over what's going on in my life. I'm not a victim of anything. Oh my God, that guy at work, I just did that thing again where I pretended to want to be nice to him, but what I really wanted was I wanted to borrow his pen and I just didn't ask. And these changes start to happen, and then you start living on a whole different level. That's why the fourth step is so important. The four things, you're not going to get that from a therapist. You're not going to get that from taking time to heal. I just need some time alone to heal. Time heals all, right? I'm almost there. I hear this all the time. I'm almost healed. I've healed most of it, but I still can't get out of my mind why she went off with him. Mike, can you explain that to me? Because if I could just figure out that one thing, and I go, you haven't done the four things, have you? No, I did two of them. You do all four of them, I promise you, you will have a self-empowered, individuated healing that will give you the ability to actually feel like you have control over your life. So, I don't know. Whatever gets you into the steps, do it, to answer your question. I don't know about the steps workbook. Like I said, some of them I like, some of them I don't. I prefer just the straight steps out of the big book. That's what I like. So I would do that. And if you're not an alcoholic, you just turn it from alcoholism to, codependence. That's all the 12 steps did, is they took alcoholism, they replaced alcoholism with whatever the issue was. I'm powerless over alcohol, I'm powerless over drugs, I'm powerless over people, I'm powerless over gambling, I'm powerless over porn, I'm powerless over love, relation, whatever the hell it is. It doesn't matter. It'll work. All right, so you say it's not very different. You're probably right. I don't think it matters. But Kim J says, I'm working on meditations. Well, that's great. Work the steps. Work the steps. If I had to pick one, somebody said I can only do one of the four things, without hesitation, I would say the 12 steps. But the thing is, you don't. You can do all of them, and all of them are free. You can find somebody online who will give you counseling for free. It's all over the place. Okay, I don't know what Aswey is doing. I mean, you're putting the heart thing on there. It feels kind of, why are you doing that? If you have something to say, say it. Anyway, I'm not going to give you a hard time. Do whatever the hell you want. Kim J, question. Will my no contact initiative break my ex's spirit and cut her deep? Why do you care? What difference does it make? You're not going no contact for anything except for your own safety. When you haven't gone no contact, there is a very real connection, and there's also a psychological connection. Until you go no contact, your borderline will be psychically pulling energy away from you. Don't you find it interesting? Those of you who've been hoovered, don't you find it interesting that they don't hoover you until you start to feel okay without them? You start to finally go, I think I'm going to be all right. Oh, hello. There's a psychic connection. That they don't discard you and really get rid of you. They put you away in a shelf. They put you in a box. You remember that game you got as a kid and you played with it for a week, and then you put it in a box and you stuck it on a shelf? You didn't sell it because I'm going to play with that game again. You pull it out maybe once every year and play with it, and then you put it back in. It's mine. I like it. I don't want to play with it right now. That's you. When they discard you, they've put you in a box on a shelf. And that's why you can't stop thinking about them. Because that game, just like in the movie Toy Story, it wants to be played. Its whole reason for existing is so that its owner will play with him. Until you go no contact, you are constantly going to be thinking about them. You breaking contact with them, hurting their spirit, cutting them deep. I don't know. Are you asking me that because you're worried about it? Or are you asking me that because you want that to be, or unconsciously both? It doesn't matter. Whatever happens to them is completely, totally unrelated to you. It means nothing. How does it change you? It cuts them? Oh well. It does nothing to them? Oh well. Who cares? All right. I answered somebody's question. Kim J, honest feeling. I have a tiny feeling of wanting to see her someday in life, maybe 10 years, 20 years later. Well, you have that feeling now, but if you do the fourth thing, how would you like this? Would you like to not have that feeling? I don't have that feeling about mine. I'm certain I'll never see her again. And I have zero desire to see her. Zero. And I don't know if she's alive or dead, happy, sad, alone, in a relationship. I don't know. And I don't care. Not because I hope she's happy, but I don't care. She's miserable, happy, I don't care. How would you like to have that feeling? So that's actually, you're telling yourself maybe 10, 20 years later. The honest truth is that you want it to be right now. So here's the thing, your unconscious doesn't know from time. If somebody hurt you 20 years ago and you're in pain, in your unconscious mind, it's happening right now. When you say, I want to see them again in 10 years, your unconscious mind doesn't know from time. It just says, oh, I'm going to see them again. So it means you still want to see them. You're giving yourself some kind of bullshit thing that somehow in 10 years you won't be as vulnerable, or somehow they'll be healthy, or whatever it is. But it means you still want to see them, which means you're not healed. Here's something you'll find out. If you do the four things, here's something that will happen. You will realize that there was no connection with them. Somebody that you have a real connection with, a family member, somebody that truly loved you and that you love, when you see them again, it's an amazing experience because it's a real connection. When you realize that what you had with the borderline was just dual projection and that there was no connection there, you won't have that need. They don't have any meaning to you anymore. And it's really important if you don't see that, if you think that your relationship with your borderline, it lasted 10 years, 20 years, you had 2 kids, whatever, you think that relationship had meaning, it means that you're still in the delusion. Borderlines, if they're untreated, are incapable of seeing you. One of the things that was most helpful for me when I was first looking into what BPD was, when I was still, bouncing back and forth between my borderline, was that I read something online that said you need to understand that borderlines never see you. You are a fuzzy outline of a person that they project all of their unconscious, unresolved issues onto. They never see you. They don't know you. They don't experience you. All the things that you want never happen. Doesn't matter how long you're with them. And if you understand that's because they have a mental illness, then you realize, oh, I was all me, which means you were doing the same thing. All of the meaning that you thought was going on is your projection. It's your transference and your projection from your childhood. It's got nothing to do with them. And when you do the fourth step, you'll realize all the pain that you're carrying around because they didn't love you. You're going to realize, holy crap, had nothing to do with them anyway. Which means there are real people that you really do love. There are relationships where you really do connect, and it really does mean something when you see them again or don't see them and you remember them. And you remember that accurately because it was a real thing. But any relationship with an untreated borderline is unreal. There's no reality to it. Which means all the pain you're carrying is purely your projection. When you realize that, you won't feel bad about never seeing him again. Because you never saw him to begin with. Silver velvet. Here's one of the things we say in 12-step work. Look for the similarities, not the differences. You say, I've noticed from this channel that many of borderline are women, so my ex is pretty rare as he's a borderline man. No. He may be physically a man, but the thing that makes him borderline is the same thing that makes women borderline. And what you're doing is you're looking for a reason to find the difference so that you can stay unique. It's a very intricate, unconscious defense mechanism that keeps you from growing. So stop looking for the differences and start looking for the similarities. There's far more similarities than differences. And the truth is, the physical nature and the sexual orientation of somebody is becoming less and less meaningful. So that doesn't mean anything. That's just your brain looking for a reason to make me and what I say different so you don't have to relate and apply it to yourself. Kim J, I wonder if my ex will remember my no contact initiative. No. Borderline, the moment you leave the room, they forget about you. And it doesn't matter. Whatever their feelings are, that statement assumes that they're rational. They're not. Whatever negative feeling they had nothing to do with you. And conversely, whatever positive feeling they had nothing to do with you either. So whether he feels negatively or doesn't is meaningless because it's all coming from inside. It's the script inside of him that's creating all of his feelings. It's a totally narcissistic, self-contained experience. It's got nothing to do with you. So it doesn't matter. What else? Ivan Jorison question. Why is it impossible for them to see you? Do I need to repeat myself? They have a mental illness. They suffer from a personality disorder. Do you understand what that means? That they're not they're not home. There's nobody there. There's nobody home. They have no identity. You, Ivan, you have an identity. You know who you are. My name is so-and-so. I was born here. Yesterday I said this, and I'm still part of that, and tomorrow I'm going to do that. You remember what you did yesterday, what you do tomorrow. You have a sense of self. They don't have any of that. Every day they wake up, they don't know who they are. They have to figure out, who am I today? Oh, who is this person? Oh yeah, I remember a movie that guy was in it, that Ivan guy. There was somebody that looked like me that was with him. I remember that movie. How do I feel about him? I don't like him. Okay, I'm going to leave. There's nobody home, man. What do you mean, why? So bear in mind that whenever somebody asks the question, why, what they really want is control. What you're really asking me is, I want the information so that I can control things. Why? Why can't they see me? What do you mean, why can't they see you? I just told you they can't. Does it matter why? They can't. It means you're not seeing. Asking the question why is not going to change the fact that you're not seen right now, which to you is everything, because the borderline is everything to you. The borderline is mommy. When I say the borderline doesn't see you, you want to know why, because if they don't see you, then nobody sees you. If I say, yeah, there's a guy across the street who has multiple personality disorder, and you've met him once and he didn't see you, you're not going to go, why? Why didn't he see you? You're going to go, oh, he's got a mental illness? Yeah. Okay. And you'll forget about it. But why does she not see you? I'm telling you guys, I can tell if you've done the 4 things or not. And the 4 things will really fix all that. Why is it impossible for them to see you? Is it because they are only concerned with themselves, or that they have never seen themselves? It's because they have a mental illness. So yes to all those questions. I've enjoyed some feeling. I did experience this and tried to explain to her for hours that it seemed she didn't even care for who I was or wanted out of life. Waste of time, though. Right. You remember the Peanuts cartoon where the adults always sounded wah, 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 wah. That's all she heard. She saw the look on your face. She saw that she wasn't perfect in your eyes. Imagine an infant. Imagine sitting down with an infant and then going, I have this feeling that you never really see me for who I am, that the only thing I am for you is to give you food and to wipe your ass. And I've been talking to you for an hour and I still haven't gotten an answer from you. And I would really like your input on the color scheme for our wedding. And I don't know why, what is the baby going to look up at? He has no idea what the hell you're talking about. That's what happened when you tried to explain to your borderline that she didn't see you. She's wah, 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 wah. Nothing. It's a complete waste of time. Yeah, you're right. Ivan says, I feel that I have, but codependency also means we have no identity in a way I read. Well, yeah. So again, codependence, in my opinion, are failed borderlines. So you do lack identity, not as much as a borderline. You have enough to have a cohesive timeline and sense of self, but you do lack identity. Your identity is not fully formed. And this is the 4 steps will give you a fully formed identity, or at least help you to create a more fully formed one. She was so good at controlling me, and that pisses me off. Kim J, she was good at controlling you because you let her control you. The person you're mad at is yourself. She couldn't have controlled you if you didn't give it to her. I'm not judging you. I gave mine a lot of control over me. You're pissed off at yourself. Here's something I've learned about being angry. Whenever I'm angry at anything, I'm angry at myself. I'm angry at myself for letting myself be controlled by somebody else. There's shame. Anger has shame. Resentment, I shouldn't say anger. Resentment has shame to it. All right, that's it. Nothing else. All right, guys, that's it for me. Hope you're doing well. And yeah, take care of yourselves. We're in a crazy period of time. So take care of yourself and stay safe. And don't let anybody make you do anything you don't feel safe doing. Whether they're the government or your boyfriend or your girlfriend. Don't let anybody make you do anything. Read into that whatever you want. All right, that's it. I'm all done. I'll see you guys next time. Take care of yourselves. Let's see, what do I want? Is this what I want to look at? No. Let's go up here. All right. I'll see you guys later. What am I looking for? I don't know. All right. See you guys later.